Thank you, everybody that is joining in from, looks like all around the world. So I'm seeing the comments of people dropping a little shout out for where they're joining from. And first of all, I want to thank our Interdimension TV community for being a part of our community and for being a part of the platform. And these community events are something that's become really important to us, especially in this year of 2023, as we've stepped up our game of connecting on this level and doing these special events where we can connect and have interviews and whatnot. So before we jump into this talk and this discussion on Ayurveda, let's just take a brief moment, because if you're like me, and probably Christy, you've been running around all morning, all day, and all of a sudden here we are. And I just want to have a few moments where perhaps we can settle. So if you're in a position where you can sit down, as long as you're not driving a car, sit down, close your eyes, and just take a moment to feel your feet on the floor, feel support underneath you as you start to turn your attention and your focus inwardly. And then let's take a nice big deep inhale through the nose as you invite the breath all the way down to the bottoms of your lungs. And then sigh out the mouth, exhale, just empty the lungs out. We'll do two more like that. Take another big full inhale, fill up the whole volume space of your lungs. And exhale, sigh it out, letting go any unnecessary tension, stress. Good, one more time, big deep inhale. And then sigh out the mouth, exhale, let it go. Keeping the eyes closed, just allow the breath to move in and out of you in its own natural, effortless way. So there's no manipulation of the breath. You just let the wisdom and the intelligence of the breath do what it knows how to do, to breathe you, to support and sustain your life. Feel the waves of the mind becoming a little less choppy and a little bit more settled and serene. The mind becomes more calm, more clear, more spacious. And then lastly, just feeling yourself centered, connected to a deeper place within you, and allowing the mind to be in a place where you're not thinking about later and you're not ruminating on earlier, but you're fully arrived in this moment right here, right now. And then as you're ready, go ahead and open up the eyes. All right, well, I needed that probably just as much as anybody else. There's certainly been a lot going on here at Interdimension TV. We just released a new training, an Ayurveda 30-hour training on Interdimension Academy yesterday. And those of you that are interested in that training, and hopefully you will feel inspired from this talk, if you're interested to learn and study this subject in greater depth and detail, you can get access to that particular training. And we have a special 20% discount right now that we're doing until Wednesday, April 16th. And that discount is 20 off. Christy will put that in the comment section and the link as well if you're interested. We also released a very special film called Ayurveda, The Science of Life on Wednesday on Interdimension TV. So if you haven't seen that short film yet, I invite you to check that out as well. So Ayurveda. What is Ayurveda? We could probably go on for many, many hours, and we certainly do in the new training. But this is a subject and a topic that I've been studying for almost 2 decades. In fact, I got into it right after I started teaching and being a yoga practitioner. The word Ayurveda means the science of life. Veda is the science. So the teachings of yoga come from the Vedas, these ancient science and these ancient scriptures. And Ayur means life. So the science or the knowledge of life. And you think about that, and that's a pretty bold statement to come out and say the science of life. And it really is a multi-dimensional modality that has so much nuance and so much complexity to it, and so many branches of it. You could probably study and practice Ayurveda your entire life, or if you believe in reincarnation, many, many lives. Ayurveda incorporates everything from the food that you eat, to herbs that you may take or drink as a form of medicine. It also incorporates lifestyle. It's really about syncing and attuning to these natural laws of nature. We'll talk a little bit more about that. It also involves essential oils and amazing body treatments, and mantras and yoga poses and breathing and meditation techniques. So there's a lot to it, a lot to Ayurveda. And even in India, where Ayurveda comes from, the way that they practice Ayurveda in northern India is often very different than the way that they practice Ayurveda in southern India. For example, in northern India, there's a greater emphasis on the herbs and what's happening internally, whereas in southern India, in a place like Kerala, they focus a lot more on body treatments. And of course, there's a lot of crossover. And typically the doctors and the physicians of Ayurveda in India, they've learned it from their parents who learned it from their parents. And so it's been passed down for many, many, many generations. And a lot of what they learn within these family systems is also kept secret. But as time has gone on and Ayurveda has spread to all corners of the world and throughout the West, there has been a greater opening of this science of life. Now, if we look at the current state of affairs on the planet, we all know that the planet is undergoing major challenges and incurring a lot of breakdowns in systems, whether that's the financial system or the media system, political systems, or the healthcare system. And where I'm from here in the United States, even though we have had all these advances in technology and in medicine, disease is at an all-time high. Mental health is a crisis right now, autoimmune disorders, heart disease, cancer, all these sorts of things that are causing tremendous amounts of suffering are proliferating throughout the whole entire world, because there has been a lack of connection to nature, a lack of awareness to the things that we're putting into our body. And in some governments and political systems, they're putting greed and money before they're putting people's welfare and health. So ultimately, we don't want to blame other people. We have to take responsibility for our own selves. We have to take responsibility for our own health and where we're at, And ultimately, the more of us that are doing that, the more that we affect change on a global scale. So as Rumi said, when I was a fool, I tried to transform the world, but when I became wise, I focused on transforming myself. So it all starts with you and what's going on within your own life and your own world. And by shifting that, then that has an effect and a ripple effect into your inner circle and then into the outer circle and then beyond. So we always have to remember that we are empowered and that these modalities like Ayurveda are a tremendous gift where we can be empowered to be in control of our own health and our own well-being. So problems are a part of life. How you deal with those problems is the art of life. Say that one more time. Problems are a part of life. How you deal with those problems is the art of life. So Ayurveda is an art, it's a science for how we can deal with these problems and these issues on a physical and a mental and emotional level, how we can take the reins of control back and steer ourselves in a direction so that we move down this path, down this road of optimal health and vitality, which is our birthright. So I want to share a little bit about how I got into Ayurveda. As a kid, I'd grown up with childhood asthma, and it was something that followed me into my adult years. And although it wasn't as bad as when I was a child, it was still there, and it would affect, as you can imagine, if any of you have incurred asthma, it really affects everything. You can't breathe properly. Last year, we released a breathwork training. And when you learn the science of the proper balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide and whatnot, you know that your breath has an effect on all the other human systems. So it would cause all sorts of issues, including issues when I would teach yoga as a newer teacher. So I started to search around for something that could help me out. I would go to acupuncture, I would go see Western doctors, I would go see anybody that I could. And it wasn't until I heard about Ayurveda that I don't know what it was, but there was a certain mystique just around that word, Ayurveda. It was very mysterious. And eventually I found out in Los Angeles at that time, there was a student clinic that existed where you could go and you could receive Ayurveda treatments for a discounted rate. So I called up, set my appointment, and eventually the time came. I went to this building, walked up the stairs, and was greeted by 3 or 4 students who took me into a room, and then they began to move through the consultation. And the consultation lasted about 60 minutes, almost an hour, where they sat me down and they would put their fingers on my radial artery here. So that's that artery that runs right down the arm here. And they would be applying all sorts of different levels of pressure. And as they were doing that, they each had a sheet of paper and they were marking on all these like weird looking symbolic diagrams. And it was like a whole new world and a whole new language that I had never encountered. And then they would ask me questions based off of what they were reading within the pulse. And it was always very, very accurate, like right on the nose. What I was struck about during that consultation was how different that was than when I would go see my Western doctor. And I want to just say here that I'm not here to bash Western medicine, and a lot of my students are amazing, amazing Western doctors that are doing great work in the world. And there's absolutely a time and a place where Western medicine is needed. But I do think that there has been an imbalance, and the wave of the future is integrative medicine and functional medicine, where we combine, I believe, the best of both worlds. So just want to put that out there, especially those of you that are in that system. So they're checking my pulse. They're spending all this time with me. They're asking me all sorts of questions. If you can imagine like a Sherlock Holmes mystery, they're trying to get the full picture of what's happening with Travis Eliot. They're asking me, what are my stress levels? How's my elimination? How do I feel about my job? How do I feel about my career? When am I eating? What am I eating? Just question after question after question. They had me stick out my tongue. They looked at the tongue for a while, which was very, very awkward and weird, right? Like it was the first time I think that I'd stuck out my tongue, and some of them even had a flashlight so that they could really see the back of the tongue. But that's part of the diagnostic process. And they also had their questionnaire. So the idea is that this is like the trifecta of figuring out what's happening with this person and what is known as that person's dosha type, which we'll talk about. So when the pulse is pointing in a certain direction, and when the tongue diagnosis is pointing in a certain direction, and when the questions and the answers to those questions are all pointing at the same spot, then you know that your diagnostics is probably spot on, and then you can proceed from there. Now, one of the great things about Ayurveda is that it says each person is unique. Each person is different. And you hear this all the time in media, where you hear somebody coming out and saying everybody should go on a keto diet, everybody should go paleo, everybody should be vegan, everybody should be this thing or this thing or this thing or this thing. And for some people, one certain way of eating and diet may work for a particular segment of the population, but for other people, it's not going to work, and it doesn't work. And we know this to be true. And this is what's great about Ayurveda, is that it's not a one size fits all approach. So when they do these, the diagnosis, they're determining what is your specific, unique constitution right now in this moment. And all of that is influenced and affected by the things like, what are your stress levels? How has your sleep been? Like, what are the foods that you're eating? What time of year is it? What season are we in? All those things have an effect, and they influence what's happening within you. So based off that, once they figured out that information, then they proceeded to move through an epic series of body treatments, or what's known as Panchakarma. So they put me on a table, and they did a treatment called Abhyanga, which is a 4-handed oil bath massage. Now, when you go to a normal massage therapist, they put a little bit of oil on there. They dribble a little bit. But this was like just an oil bath, tons and tons of oil. One of the reasons for that is that oil is very, very good for Vata dosha. Vata is a dosha where we get dry. It's connected to stress. Yesterday, I released a class from the new training on YouTube, and it's called Vinyasa Vata. And the reason why I chose that class to release to the masses was because everybody has stress. The world is moving through a tremendous amount of stress. Stress and Vata are always related. So all the warm oil is great for the Vata dosha, which is great for just about anybody. After they did that for 45 minutes, they took me to a steam box where they had been boiling fresh eucalyptus leaves. And I sat in that box for about 15 to 20 minutes. And what that does, that steam therapy, it opens up all the body channels so that all the oils, which they had put herbs into the oils, begin to transdermally go through the skin and start to go through the channels of the body. And so those herbs start to get absorbed. After the steam box, and they brought me back to the table, and they did a treatment called Nasya, which is where they put a couple of drops into the nose, and then you breathe that in. And again, that oil has herbs in it that go, and they affect your sinuses. They have an effect on your brain, your breathing channels, your respiratory channels opened up. And again, I was there because of asthma. I could feel what's called the pranavaha shrotas being restored back to a healthy condition. And then finally, the dessert at the end of all this is a treatment called Shirdar, where you lay on your back and they pour a steady stream of lightly warm oil that hits the forehead or the third eye, and then that runs all the way back along the crown of the head. And so these energetic points are called marma points, and we go over that in the training as well. So we have all these marma, these energetic points similar to acupressure points, that are really these intersections or these gateways of energy, or where prana flow through, that are also happening through all the fascial tissue and the connective tissue as well. So if a channel gets blocked or stuck, then that energy is not able to irrigate, and information and intelligence is not being able to flow seamlessly through the body. And then gradually over time, those systems begin to break down. So we want all those channels to be opened up. So this opens up these marma points all along here. This is called Stapani marma. And then there's another big one right at the crown of the head when we're babies. That's a soft spot, and it hits that as well. So by the time I finish that treatment, and this is after having, I've had my fair share of spa treatments, right? Like I've been to Thailand, I've been all around the world, done spa treatments. But this just blew all those away, because you go to a normal spa treatment and it feels really, really good. It feels really, really, really good. But what this was on a whole other level. It was like the treatment went into the depths of my heart. It went deep into my soul. And it felt like that power, that energy that was there, was connected to and tapped into, and I was back to being fully vibrant and fully alive. Like I felt almost as if I had been reborn. So after that, they take me into a classroom, and on the classroom was a whiteboard with all these strange names. And what I came to find out was these were herbs that they had put into an herbal formula for me. So they gave me this box of herbs, and they said, Travis, you're going to drink 2 teaspoons of this 2 to 3 times a day. They gave me a specific diet to follow. They gave me lifestyle recommendations, what time to go to bed, when to wake up. And I felt like I walked away from this experience having gained and acquired so much value. It was like I was an active participant in the experience, and that not only was I receiving this deeply soul charging treatment, but I was also learning. I was acquiring information and knowledge. And immediately I could feel like it had an effect and impact on my breathing. And eventually the asthma went away, and I haven't had an asthma attack and I can't even remember how long. So as all things in my life, when I discover something that changes my life like that and has a real impact, I always go to the place where it's like, I have to learn this so that I can go and share this to others. Like I just want to share this with other people. So I called up to school and inquired about when's your next class? Because I'm like, I got to figure out what happened and how these students were able to do what they did. They were like modern day Taoists and sorcerers that were, doing things I'd never seen before. And as fate would have it, there was an introductory to Ayurveda class that was happening about a week after my treatment. So I just signed up for it, and I was just going to do the introduction class. But I go to the class, and the professor who was there guiding the students during my treatment, really tall guy, looked gray beard, gray hair, like a modern day Gandalf, if you can imagine that. And what I came to find out, this particular teacher, John Holmstrom, had lived in India for many years and ran an herbal plantation there that was like, I think, 250 acres. And he was the kind of person that would do everything from going out to the fields to get the herbs, to seeing the clients, to giving the treatments. A lot of Ayurveda doctors, they have staff that do kind of the dirty work, right? So they just kind of come in and they advise or whatnot. But John Holmstrom, he did everything. And he was very hands-on and he was very practical. So we go through that opening class, and he's like dropping all this information and wisdom in a very accessible and relatable way. And the whole time my mind is just being completely blown by this information. I'm feeling like every cell in my body just charged up, like I am in the right place doing exactly what I need to be doing. And by the end of that first class, he had us checking each other's pulse. And as soon as that was done, I was like, I'm all in. I'm going to sign up for this whole entire Ayurvedic practitioner course. And I went on to do 660 hours of training, receiving my Ayurveda practitioner certification over the span of the next 2 years. And at the end of that 2 years, me and another student that I've been studying with, we decided to open up our own clinic in Venice, California. So we rented an office space. I was a new dad. I was like in my mid to late 20s. I was very young. I was teaching yoga. I was singing kirtan and chanting, and I had this Ayurveda clinic. And we started to see people, and they were coming in, and we were usually the end of the road. They'd gone to all the other doctors and all the other people, and finally there they are, and they're desperate. They're desperate for help because nobody else can help fix them. And as we would give them the correct diet and the lifestyle, and they would come in and receive the same treatments that I had experienced, sure enough, they would begin to tap into the innate intelligence that resides within, that knows how to heal, that knows how to bring everything back to balance or homeostasis. And sure enough, they would get better. But running that Ayurveda clinic really required somebody who was going to be dedicated it to full time, to do it the right way, to make the herbs, to customize the oils, to see the people, to do the treatments. Some of the treatments would last three plus hours. And if you're doing that multiple times a day, there's really no other time for anything else. And so as that began to unfold, also my yoga teaching path really began to take off. And so I started to feel myself becoming vatted out, becoming stressed out. And so I had to make the difficult decision. Am I going to focus on teaching yoga, or am I going to focus on running an Ayurveda clinic? And although it was very difficult, I decided that my path was being a yoga teacher. However, even though I would let go of that Ayurveda clinic, I would always have Ayurveda within me. It would always be a part. It was fully integrated into who I was, how I was living my life. And even when I taught my very first yoga workshop ever, it was called the Triangle of Transformation. What I taught in that workshop was yoga, Ayurveda, and chanting or kirtan. And that was the triangle for me, the triangle of transformation. So I would include it within my teachings. And so here we are today. And again, we just released a brand new 30-hour Ayurveda training. I'm looking at the time right now, and I'm realizing that it's already 10:30, and I want to make sure that we do have some time towards the end. But before I kick it over to Christy and you guys to ask questions, because we did tell you we were going to share 5 spring tips with you, I want to make sure that I share that with you, okay? So most of you are watching from the Northern Hemisphere. Those of you in the Southern Hemisphere, Australia, New Zealand, or whatnot, obviously this is going to be the opposite. But for most of us, we're now newly into this new season of spring. And I understand that some areas it still feels like winter. Some areas there's still snow on the ground, but generally, officially in the Northern Hemisphere, we're now coming into this new season. So Ayurveda, which is based off the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. Those 5 elements exist within our whole entire universe, our outer world, within nature, and they also exist within us. For example, earth, your bones, your teeth. Water, we're 75% water. Fire, the fire of digestion, the fire of assimilation. Air, Every time you breathe, that's that element of air. Nerve impulses moving from the brain down the spinal cord out to the rest of the body. Air is the wind that moves those pulses. Space, we are 99.99999% space. We're more space than we are anything else, even though it seems like we're so dense and material, we're actually more space than anything else. So that's how that manifests in the body. Now, those 5 elements translate to what we call the 3 doshas, or the functional principles, which are vata, pitta, and kapha. Vata is the element of air and space. Pitta is fire and water. And kapha, let's see, I did vata, pitta, kapha. Kapha is water and earth. So right now, springtime is very much a time of year where kapha increases. We move through winter. Temperatures are cold. Think about snow and ice on the mountains, and that's just been accumulating and accumulating and accumulating. Now we start to shift from winter into spring. Things start to warm up. Things start to heat up. The fire begins to increase. Now the snow begins to slowly melt. The ice begins to slowly melt. So within your body, all the toxins of wintertime, especially if you move through the holidays and you're like me and you're indulging, in all those holiday treats, well, those toxins, they get lodged within your tissues. And as the outer environment begins to warm up, this begins to loosen up and it begins to flow through the tissues, or what we call the dhatus. And that toxicity is called ama. And ama is something that we want to get out of our body. We want to get rid of that. And I go over how to do all of this in the new 30-hour Ayurveda training. So here we are in spring. These are 5 tips to help you transition through this new season while keeping your doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha, and especially kapha, in balance. Number 1, first thing in the morning, is to try a technique called oil pulling. Oil pulling is where you get about 1 to 2 tablespoons of either coconut oil, sesame oil, or you can even search this on Amazon and you can buy it already made. And you take that and you put it in your mouth and you swish it vigorously around your mouth for about 5 to 10 minutes. And what that's going to do is it's going to stick to any toxicity and harmful bacteria that might be in the mouth. It's going to gather all of that. And after you've done that for 5 to 10 minutes, you're going to spit it out, not in the sink, not in the shower, but you can sink it out in the trash can, or you can go outside and spit it into the dirt. Because if you spit it into your sink, then it'll eventually clog the sink up. This is also really good for, it's like face yoga, you're switching all this around. So it's good for the muscles in the face, good for the shape of the space, your face, you're working all of those various muscles. After you do that, then you're going to get a tongue scraper. You can also get a tongue scraper online. You can get it on Amazon. I have a nice copper tongue scraper. You take it at the back of the tongue and you just pull it down. And I like to do it 8 times. So you're clearing the ama off of the tongue. And the thicker the coat, the more indicative that is that you have built up ama within your system. Number 3, ginger tea. Ginger tea is great for eating away at the ama. It's really, really good for balancing out kapha. So you can sip on ginger tea in the morning, afternoon, evening. You can sip on it all throughout the day. You can do fresh ginger tea, which is most ideal, where you boil a ginger root, or you can just make it easy and get a ginger tea bag. That's fine as well. Number 4, go big on lunch. Lunchtime is the time of day where your Agni and your fire and your Pitta is at its zenith, it's at its highest. So we don't want to have it in the morning time or in the nighttime where the digestive power is not as strong. We want to have it at lunch. So if you can, have a nice, big, robust lunch. Ideally for breakfast, you're eating like a bowl of oatmeal or rice cereal, something of that nature that's nice and warm and easy to digest. And then for lunchtime, You could be eating something like a thick stew, or what we call khichdi, which we also learned how to do in the Ayurveda training. All of this we go into great detail in the training. Asparagus, arugula, dandelion greens, lemon juice, cardamom, all these are great for this time of year of springtime. You want to avoid dairy as much as possible. You want to avoid things that are cold, ice cream, ice in your water. All of that is going to create a greater imbalance of kapha. Number 5, bring on the power exercise, the power yoga. So this is a time of year where you want to step up your exercise routine. You, again, have accumulated all this kapha. So in order to like break up that kapha and start to get it out of the system, great time to do more strong, vigorous yoga, or to run, or whatever you like to do that's athletic. So those are your 5 tips: oil pulling, tongue scraping, ginger tea, go big on lunch, and bring on the power. Try it out. You could just do one, do whatever you want, take it or leave it, explore it, see how you feel, and then shout me out on social media. Let me know how that goes. And with no further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Christy, who will coordinate any questions or stories that you guys would like to share.
Great. Thank you so much, Travis. So we have actually a couple of questions asking about nutrition and how it kind of relates to Ayurveda. So Lena from Switzerland, she has a question. So she's saying, I'm currently studying nutrition and dietetics in Switzerland, and it's a very science-based degree. The main focus is basically how to support people that are already very sick. And though we learn to also coach people out of unhealthy eating habits, it's a rather one-size-fits-all approach, which really bothers her. I want to ask if you have any experience or advice on how to combine the traditional Ayurvedic teachings with modern day and evidence-based nutritional advice that both respects current research as well as the tradition, wisdom, and culture behind Ayurveda.
Great question, and thank you for that. So when we talk about science-based and research-based and all that stuff, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that even though Ayurveda and Chinese medicine have been around a long time, there's been tremendous amounts of research and whatnot around these old modalities. So there's in the United States, there's the National Institute of Health, which is a huge organization that does a tremendous amount of research and studies, and they offer grants and whatnot. And they now have an entire division that's dedicated to what they call complementary medicine, where they pump a tremendous amount of money and research into these topics. So I think we have to be careful about, saying, Western medicine has been researched and is science, and Eastern medicine isn't. I think that they both have, and they both are. And remember, Ayurveda is the science of life. So for thousands of years, 5,000 years, this has been tested out and whatnot. Now, I will say this. People are okay with me telling them how to do yoga. They're okay with me telling them how to breathe. They are okay with me telling them how to meditate. But when I offer suggestions on food, some people go ballistic. They go absolutely crazy and they get incredibly triggered. And it makes sense in a way, because there is so much trauma around food. There is so much within our culture that's projected onto us to look a certain way, to be a certain way, and if we're not, that we're not healthy, or we somehow are lacking optimal health. So, and also food is something that we can all relate to. And so I just want to put that out there, that it can be a very, very delicate subject and a very triggering subject for a lot of people. When people would come to see me first of all, I always test something out on me. I never go out and teach anything or share anything with anybody else that I haven't tried myself for a long, long, long time. Now, I realize that what may work for me doesn't work for anybody else. And this is why I'm never the kind of person that goes out and says, everybody must do this. You have to do this. You have to do it this way. If anything, it's the opposite. It's like you are your own guru. You are your own teacher. I'm just here to offer you suggestions. Like Bruce Lee used to say, take what you want, discard what you don't want. And that's how I feel about all of this. And that's how I feel about Ayurveda. So I think that if you are feeling that there is this one size fits all approach within that, I think that you have to come to it with that particular approach, where there's going to be certain things that you're going to take from the course and the training. And then there's going to be things where you're probably going to say to yourself, and it sounds like you already are, you know what, there's a better way to do this. There's a better way to innovate this. And this is how things evolve. And so maybe you start to see some of these nuances within your clients where you can merge what it is that you're learning within this program and also some Ayurveda principles. So for example, maybe when it's summertime and it's very, very, very hot, you're going to go to certain types of foods that you know are going to be good for pacifying heat and pitta and inflammation within people's bodies. Maybe in the wintertime when it's really, really, really cold, you're going to make sure that people are not eating raw food, because in Ayurveda, that's the last thing that you want to do, because it throws Vata and Kapha out of balance. So there's a way, I think, of you being able to continue on the path that you are, and at the same time, investigating, asking these questions. How can I do this better? How can I innovate? And how can I, most importantly, be of service to people? And I guarantee that if you allow that to be your compass, you will go out and you will be able to help a lot of people.
Great. Thank you. Let's see here. So it looks like Jay over in Spain, he has a question about oil pulling. So he does it, once in a while, but how often do you do it, Travis? Do you do it every day, or do you have any recommendations on when to do when and how to do oil pulling?
Well, it's funny because some Ayurveda schools, they recommend that you do it 20 minutes a day. And it's like, who has 20 minutes a day just to do oil pulling, right? So with all these things, especially when you're just starting out, I think it's good to go with less is more. Like we say this with people that are learning how to meditate. You know what, just do 2 minutes. You don't have to do 20 minutes. You don't have to do 30 minutes. So with the oil pulling, do what you can do. You can do it for 1 minute, and that's still going to be highly beneficial. For me, I go through phases where I will do it every day. Part of Ayurveda is about listening to your intuition and your body's wisdom. And we all have this ability through interoception of like being in attunement with sensations that are happening within our body. And the more attuned that you are to that, then the more that you can start to make decisions that are honor that wisdom that is being expressed by your body. So this is how I live my life. I will sometimes go through phases where it's like, okay, I need to be religiously doing oil pulling. And when I do it, like when I really commit to it, in Ayurveda, we always say, if you're going to try something, do it for 35 days. So a little bit over a month. Now, why the 35 days? Well, that's because you have 7 tissues. You have lymph, blood, muscle, fat, bone, nerve, and reproductive. So those are the 7 tissues, the 7 dhatus, which we also go over in the new training. And what you eat today in Ayurveda takes 5 days to go through each one of those tissues. So what you eat today is going to impact those tissues for the next 35 days. So when you do a new habit, such as oil pulling, I would say, all right, just try to do it for 35 days as an experiment and see if you notice a difference. Now, I notice for myself when I do it, I feel more alert. I feel more fresh. Like there's some sort of impact that it has, not just on the gums and the teeth, but it's something that it has an impact also within the mind. A lot of times these harmful bacteria and amas of toxicity that proliferate in our mouth, they go down into our system and they start circulating through those tissues. So when we do the oil pulling, we're ejecting all that toxicity out and not allowing it to move into the system. So long story short, if you're new, do what you can. Try to do it for 35 days. If you've already been doing it every other day, 3 times a week, anything is better than not doing it.
Awesome. Thank you. It looks like we have time for a couple more questions. Let's see here. So it looks like Lucas has a question. So he recently participated in an Ayurveda workshop. And in this workshop, they talked a lot about, or not a lot, a bit about fasting for the doshas. Do you have any advice on fasting, like for the doshas, or have you ever experienced that before?
Yeah, so when it comes to fasting, again, it comes back to nothing is ever a one size fits all approach. So right now, what's really popular is intermittent fasting, where you're fasting for 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-hour window or whatnot. Each person is different, each dosha is different. So for example, if we look at a Vata dosha type, a Vata is a person that's composed mainly of air and space. So these are going to be people that are skinnier, lower weight, thinner, smaller, and whatnot. Pitta is going to be more medium style build and muscular and athletic. Kapha are a bigger body type, so bigger bone, bigger skeletal system, maybe more fat on the body. So if we're looking at fasting from an Ayurvedic perspective, what we typically recommend is that if there's a dosha type that would be good for fasting, it would be Kapha. And what Kaphas can do based off of how they're feeling is they could potentially skip breakfast, and then their first meal would be at lunchtime. But you can see how a Vata type who's already thin and doesn't have the same volume of tissue structure, how if they were to do that, that would actually aggravate the Vata. They would lose even more weight. They would lose even more tissue. So in Ayurveda, we have detoxification, and then we have rebuilding. So herbs and body treatments typically follow under this category. There's certain herbs that you take if you want to detox. And then there's certain herbs that you take if you want to build up tissue, which is called Rasayana in Ayurveda. So with the Vata type, I would focus more on the Rasayana and building good quality tissue before I would have them do any sort of fasting.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis. So it looks like Lena actually wants to ask a question herself. So I'm going to turn her camera on. In the meantime, one more question from Rebecca. She's asking about the doshas and the change of seasons. Is there such a thing? Like, do people have to follow a protocol for our doshas and the change of the seasons?
Yeah, that's what Ayurveda is all about. It's all about being in alignment with the rhythm of the seasons. We talked a little bit about that. You know, summertime is a hotter time of year, so that's where Pitta increases. And then as we transition into fall, that's where Vata starts to increase and Pitta starts to come down. Temperatures begin to cool down. In the wintertime, we have Kapha and we also have Vata. Things are very, very cold. Things get stale and stagnant. And then in springtime, we just went over some of the tips for springtime, but that's also a Kapha time of year. So it's very important because if you're doing a Kapha reducing protocol at the wrong time of year, then it's actually not going to work or be effective. And in some cases, it could actually make things worse. So this is why you want to know your dosha. And by the way, it gets more complex than just being Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Those are called monotypes, but you'll also learn in the training that we have what's called dual types. So typically, especially when I would see people in the clinic, most people are dual types. So they will be like a Vata Pitta or a Pitta Kapha or a Pitta Kapha. And whichever one you say first is the one that's more dominant. So if you're a Vata Pitta, you're more Vata than you are Pitta, but Pitta is definitely there. And by the way, we all have all three doshas. So if somebody's a Vata Pitta, it doesn't mean that there's no Kapha. Kapha is still there. It just means that they are dominantly two of the doshas.
Great, thank you. I think Lena wanted to ask a question via video. So let me see. Hello, Lena.
Hi, thank you for already answering one of my questions. I don't want to take away time from anybody else because I already got one question answered. So if there's anyone else around, I can back off.
We have a couple more questions, but feel free to ask yours since you're on camera already. And yeah, why not?
Since there's like different types of foods that the different doshas are like most prone to eat or should eat, is there also a similar like way of exercise that is specific to the doshas, so that, for example, the kapha are more strength training, or is there anything like that?
Yes, absolutely. There, if we look at just yoga in of itself, we have so many different styles of yoga, right? Like we have power yoga, we have yin yoga, we have gentle, we have restorative, we have ashtanga, and so on. So a kapha person is, again, a person that has a bigger build, bigger skeletal system, maybe more body fat percentage than another person. So kaphas are going to be the type, the dosha, that are going to respond very well to more vigorous forms of exercise. So power yoga, if we're just talking about yoga purely, would be great. High intensity cardio would be great for a kapha to get to move their body. Now, typically the way that it works is usually whatever dosha you are, you like to take the path of least resistance. So if I'm a kapha person and I'm predominantly the element of earth and water, I typically gravitate towards styles of exercise and movement that are in alignment with things that are like a little bit heavy. So typically kaphas love yin yoga and they love restorative yoga, and they may not even want to work out. They may not even want to exercise. So they have to be pushed out of their comfort zone to do the opposite. So there's this law in Ayurveda that says in order to find the balance, you have to oppose the condition. So if you're a kapha person and you're heavy and you're still and you're stagnant, how do you oppose that? You get them moving. You get them moving in a very active way. All right, now let's look at the pitta person. Pitta person, muscular, athletic, they love to work out. They love power yoga. They love ashtanga yoga. They love to run. They love to lift weights. They are addicted to vigorous forms of exercise. And it's not that that's bad, but the pitta persons are the ones that if we want to oppose the condition, we got to get them to chill out. We got to get them to cool down. So how do we do that? Yeah, you got to do some more yin yoga. You got to do more restorative yoga. You got to do yoga nidra. You got to take time to just calm down. Otherwise, your pitta is going to get completely out of balance. And then vata person, skinnier, thinner, smaller, lighter. Vatas are the element of air, space. So vatas are like all over the place. They're the ones that may get into a thing and then they leave a thing. And then they're like, oh, I'm going to try this. And then now I'm going to go try this. And they're super inconsistent and super irregular because they're like air just moving around like wind. So the vatas are the ones that were like, we need to get you on a specific routine And we need to have you doing forms of exercise. They're going to help you ground. If Avada's like Avada may love to like do like dance and be creative and all, and it's good, but at the same time, like they're the ones in yoga class that want to kind of go off and do their own thing because they're so creative, but we have to rein them in and focus on alignment, focus on form, focus on being steady. So I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Lena. We have a couple more questions, but I know we're really running out of time, so I'm going to ask the question very, very quickly. Where do you usually, I'm going to put like 3 questions into one. Where do you usually buy your food at, and in regards to Ayurveda? Also, have you ever dealt with the population of people who unfortunately have cancer or other diseases? And lastly, you mentioned diagnostics. To what extent is it possible to diagnose yourself?
Okay, food. So for food, the good thing about Ayurveda is that part of Ayurveda is about being aware, where do you live? Where's your environment at? So although you can go out and you can get Indian foods and Indian spices and Indian herbs, by the way, I highly recommend a place, especially if you're in the US, called Banyan Botanicals. Banyan Botanicals. They have lots of herbs, lots of the tongue scraper, all that stuff you can find at Banyan Botanicals. They have great blogs, a lot of information there, good resource. So wherever you live at, you can work within what exists in your environment. So my professor, John Holmstrom, used to use herbs that were grown in Southern California because that's where we lived at. And he was able to use those in an Ayurvedic way. So, you know, ideally you would go to a farmer's market and you would be getting food that is obviously fresh and doesn't have preservatives and chemicals and whatnot. The good thing is now you can go online, you can go to Amazon or whatever your thing is, and you can order, you know, split yellow mung dal and get like huge portions of that. One of the main meals in Ayurveda is called khichdi. We also go over that in the training, like I have a recipe and how to do that. So that's the food part. The diagnostic part, can you diagnose yourself? The answer is yes and no. It's yes, because like if you do the Ayurvedic training, you're going to test everything out on yourself. Like I'm going to teach you the principles, and then you're going to do it on yourself. And then you're also going to go and find a guinea pig in your life. So you're going to get your husband or your wife or whoever you can to be your guinea pig. And you're going to do all these tools with them so that you actually really learn how to do it. Now, you're not learning to become an Ayurveda doctor. You're not learning to even be an Ayurvedic practitioner like I am certified in. You're just learning Ayurveda. So it's not like you're going to go out there and deal, you know, with serious stuff. But you can get you can do a questionnaire and start to get a good idea as to what your dosha is. You can go on Banyan Botanicals. They have a free questionnaire. In the training, I give you a couple questionnaires, so you'll do those, you'll answer that, and you'll start to see, oh, you know, I tally everything up. I have 24 in Vata and 12 in Pitta and 6 in Kapha. I now know I'm probably a Vata Pitta. And then once you learn what you are, then I tell you all the things that are appropriate for your dosha, the foods to eat, the herbs to take, the yoga poses to do, the lifestyle. When do you get up? When do you go to bed? When do you eat? How much do you sleep? All those things, as you go through the training, you start to learn. Also, I'm going to teach you how to look at your tongue. And I'm giving you like the introductory perspective on all this. So again, it's not like you're going to be like a master at tongue diagnosis. You're also going to learn how to kind of read the first level, the pulse. So the pulse is fascinating. There's 7 levels of the pulse, and each one is connected to the doshas and the dhatus and the organs and even the chakras on a very deep level. Obviously, in a 30-hour training, we're not going to go that deep, but I'm going to give you like level 1. You know, there's a pitta type of a pulse, which feels like a frog that jumps out at you. The kapha pulse is the one that's hard to find, and it's like a swan, elegant, slow, and steady. The vata pulse is like a snake, just kind of all over the place. So when I correlate the pulse to the animal and you start to feel that, you're like, oh, wow, this is jumping out at me like a frog. That affirms that I'm pitta. Then I go and look at my tongue and I see my tongue is actually pretty red. That's pitta. I do the questionnaire. I'm more pitta than anything else. So now I've self-diagnosed myself that I'm probably a pitta. Although the ultimate way to do this, of course, is to go see somebody who's highly qualified and get them to do their diagnosis. But until that happens, this is a great way to start. Now, lastly, to answer the piece about cancer. So again, I was never trained to be a doctor. We are certified practitioners, not a physician, not a doctor. And so when it comes to medical conditions, we always tell people that they need to consult with their doctor. It's the legal thing to do, and it's also the responsible thing to do. So I should probably leave that at that.
Great. Well, I know we're a little bit over, but I think that was all the questions. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Travis, for this time for talking about Ayurveda. And yeah, until our next community conversation. Thank you all again.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining. See you next time.